welcome back to Beyond the Blocks. This week my two co-hosts are unavailable, so you've just got me today. Last year I completely rewrote my 10-pin bowling arcade game The Lanes to eliminate bugs and make it easier to scale. But we didn't just rewrite the features, we switched our entire programming language from native Luau to TypeScript. If you work with UI on Roblox, you'll want to stick around to the end, because the secret weapon I'm going to share is a total game changer for me. I'm Adam, director of Last Level Studios, and this is why we're using TypeScript instead of Luau. It's a bit of a different episode this week, given that it's just me, and I didn't want this to be a long, boring monologue, so it's quite short. We'll be back to our usual programming from next week onwards, but in the meantime, enjoy this quick technical look at why Last Level Studios uses TypeScript instead of Luau for all of our experiences. If you spent any time developing or browsing any Roblox scripting forum, you'll definitely have seen errors like attempt to index nil with whatever property. It's a classic and it indicates your code isn't pointing at the instance that you thought it was, or maybe what you thought was text ended up being a number and you got an error while trying to use it. It's very common. Coming from an engineering background, I have a very low tolerance for maybe. In flight systems, maybe is a complete disaster. In game dev, it's a crash at 2 a.m. I became aware of a project called Roblox-TS a few years ago, which is a TypeScript to Lua compiler made by Roblox engineer Osiris, and I immediately knew I needed to try it for myself. TypeScript is built around the fundamental problem that JavaScript didn't have strict or explicit typing, and there was no built-in type checker. Lua is very, very similar. Both have a fluid system where a variable can be reassigned to different types and you can't enforce that a particular type is being passed around without a lot of extra code and faff. In some ways this can be nice for beginners, but in other ways it can teach bad habits, and you can end up relying on this fluid system in ways that later break unexpectedly when tweaking your code. Roblox knows this has been a problem historically, and we do now have a typing system in Roblox scripting with Luau, but it's still changing and developing very often. In fact, Roblox overhauled and released a new version of the type solver just a few months ago. It's still finding its feet compared to TypeScript, which is a battle-tested industry standard used by the likes of Microsoft and Google and Facebook, which has over a decade to perfect just one simple mission, stopping you from making silly mistakes. So that's the first reason why I made this switch. TypeScript is essentially a contract. You define the rules of your data up front, and the compiler just refuses to let you break them before the code even makes its way to Roblox. With Roblox-TS, I can write code on my laptop, nowhere near a Roblox server, and be 99% sure that it won't crash when it eventually goes live. I'm catching the attempt to index nil bugs in my editor, not in a live game, with 50 players wondering why their bowling ball disappeared. The second reason is the ecosystem. Professional development is all about dependencies, not reinventing the wheel. Think about features such as, some awkward maths that's been solved by thousands of people before you, or some neat low-code tooltips for your UI, or even an entire UI framework. Reinventing the wheel in these cases takes a lot of time and can introduce bugs. Packages, on the other hand, crowdsource the bug finding and fixing, so you get much better reliable features for the generic stuff. In the TypeScript world, we have a package manager called npm. This is the classic one that everyone's heard of. It is the first one. I think it's probably the slowest, probably the clunkiest. This is from 2010. But if a solution exists, it's there. It's on npm, it's versioned, and your editor probably handles it automatically. In the Lua world, it still feels like a bit of a scavenger hunt. You're looking for assets in the creator store, maybe random GitHub repos or dev forum posts, shifting between various package managers like Wally or Rowstrap. There's no single town square for all the code to live, and that's a bit of a problem. Even with AI tools like Windsurf, which I use as a coding assistant, they perform significantly better with TypeScript. It has billions of lines of training data to pull from across the whole internet, making it much more reliable at helping me write clean code compared to the more niche and evolving syntax of Luau. Don't get me wrong, it can still struggle with the nuances of Roblox-TS from time to time, but some custom instructions for my AI agent and some existing code patterns have got it to be maybe 99% accurate at this point. And finally, on to reason 3, and this is the part that I teased at the start for any UI developers out there. Building UI in Roblox can be a nightmare. Most people use templating, where they design it in Studio and then write endless lines of code to find and update all the individual elements, and it gets messy really, really fast. I actually have a background in web development. My first ever job was freelance web development while I was still in school, so faced with Roblox's UI system, I was desperate for something more intuitive for me. And that's where JSX comes in. It's a way to define your UI in a hierarchical structure that looks a lot like HTML but acts like code. It makes it incredibly easy to see exactly how your UI is nested at a single glance. For the lanes, this turned our complex interface from a headache into a dream. This combined with React, which Roblox ported from the web development world over to Roblox UI, it's insanely powerful. We'll probably do a whole episode about just React and what it means for UI designers, but using JSX on top of that to define the component structure and the properties takes it to a whole new level. Now, I've been pretty hard on the sell, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. If you're considering the switch to TypeScript, there are the big 3 hurdles that I think of. 1, there's no studio editing, so you lose the ability to edit scripts directly in Roblox Studio. You pretty much need to use an external editor like VS Code or Windsurf and sync your files back into the game with Roho or Roblox's built-in file sync. So that can be a problem for some people. Tracing errors to specific line numbers is also a challenge. So when your game errors, you get a Luau line number in the output window. But if you wrote TypeScript, tracing those lines back to TypeScript can sometimes take a bit of detective work because it's not one-to-one in the translation. Especially if it's unexpected errors and UI issues that you weren't prepared for, you won't have output the specific lines as part of your prints and error statements. And the third hurdle is that if you want to work at the bleeding edge of Roblox's API, it can be a pain. Roblox-TS is a community project, so it relies on the community to update it if it needs it. And for certain API, it can lag behind the very latest updates. Most of the core API is fine, instances and their properties are generally pretty good, but there are weird ones out there, like Starter GUI setCore and getCore have quite strange interfaces and needed to be manually typed, and sometimes they can differ from the real thing with Roblox-TS. The good news is, because it's a community project and because it's open source, you can not only spot these issues, but you can fix them yourself and request to get your changes merged in for everyone to benefit from. So, is it worth it? For me, absolutely. I think the speed and the confidence that I get from type safety and JSX far outweigh the friction of using external tools. I'm using Roblox-TS for all my new projects, including the 72-hour game jam I did back in February. If you want to try it out, head to roblox-ts.com for some simple examples and more information about the types, the ecosystem, and the tooling that make it so powerful. Or if this episode made you realize you'd rather stick with the native experience of Luau, then head to luau.org, luau.org, to see how the Roblox team is bringing some of that TypeScript magic directly into Luau. Let me know what side of the fence you land on in the comments, and we'll be back to our normal episodes from next week. Beyond the Blox is produced by Seb Jensen for Last Level Studios. Watch on YouTube or Spotify, listen wherever you get your podcasts, and catch highlights on TikTok and Shorts. Visit lastlevel.co.uk/podcast for more.